Hey everyone, I am glad to introduce Joseph Anderson, my friend, and the last time he and I spoke was the last time I gave him an international audience. That's the kind of guy he is. Hello, Joseph Anderson.
Hello, Joe.
You're going to talk to us today about quality, a topic about which you know a great deal. And um, I know that it is a science that has great precision to it, and it's very much about process. And I think besides quality management systems, when it comes to medical devices, and people are like, oh yeah, that's a system and we have to do that or else regulatory this and that. The concept of quality is bantied around in a like, oh, this is good quality. It's, that means well made and not going to break and, good raw materials. And I think the word quality has an image problem. And we all kind of say, like, yeah, this is a quality product. But that's not what quality means, not where you're concerned, right?
No, I would agree with that. There was a lot in what you just said, actually. I think, when hearing quality management systems kind of a pet peeve of mine. I think most companies view that as just an IT tool. That if you click some magic buttons, follow a few workflows or decision workflows within the tool, everything magically works for you. And then, as you stated, you have this quality product where it works and everybody's happy with it and it doesn't break. And I think that's exactly where we're at in this world. And for me, it's, not to bore everyone, but it's more about a quality management platform. And what we've seen this year is for most companies, that platform or that quality management ecosystem is broke or inefficient at best. It's definitely not effective. You could have the best QMS tool in the world and still be a poor company, right? You could be a poorly operated, your quality could be horrible, and you could pay millions for a QMS system. That's not what quality is built upon. It should be on a platform. And with the coronavirus, the COVID, I think, you and I've discussed this before a little bit. When are we going to get back to normal? And you keep hearing that. And I think people need to realize and businesses need to realize that this is your new normal, and we're going to have to adapt. This has changed the game, so to speak, across the regulatory environment as well. We have a lot of companies right now that are getting kind of a CYA because we've got a lot going on from people's homes, and I guarantee you those don't meet certain compliant or regulatory compliant stipulations, and we just need to adjust. So I think the new norm is, how are we going to really have this quality management platform when we're spread upon countries, sites? Travel is going to be restricted for at least another year. We all need to admit that. Most companies are going to be hesitant to bring a large workforce back in unless it's absolutely critical, because they just don't want the liability.
So when I put this video up for replay, I'm changing the title because I think we just happened on the thing that we really need to be talking about today, and that is how COVID-19 has changed quality management forever. And I guess I don't have romance copy ready for it, but is it we need a new playbook, or is it just, no, seriously, folks, the stuff I've been talking about all this time, if you had been doing it in the first place, we wouldn't be in this situation?
Yeah. I think you see it in a lot of the countries.
I want to specifically ask that question. If we had been Joseph Anderson disciples, the Institute for Process Excellence, we were following the playbook. We did all of the CM2 and everything. Would we have trouble today, given COVID?
From a quality perspective, you'd be okay and you would have adjusted. CM2 wouldn't have solved if you had over leverage.
CM2 means?
It's the enterprise standard for change and configuration management. So how to manage your product across the life cycle. Simple as that. How to manage your product or service across its full life cycle. So from the time you have an idea on a napkin until the time it's decommissioned. So that's a very simple description. CM2 would have ensured that you had the proper supply chain linkages, the proper quality control. You would have been able to manage that from wherever. But that doesn't, CM2 is not going to make sure you have proper leadership, right? That haven't over leveraged your business. So you can't pay your employees, or a disaster, right? A tsunami. CM2 ensures that you could quickly recover and move sites. But you still have to have some proper business management. And that's where a lot of companies, weren't ready. It's even been a struggle for IPX. I'd be dishonest if, I wasn't sitting in this chair saying, wow, this has not impacted us at all. We operate as nimbly and as lean as possible. But when in April, over 30-40% of your revenue gets put on hold for a year, from your committed bookings, that's tough. And that's tough for any company. And so that's been hard. And no, there's no magic for that unless you just you're sitting on a lot of cash, or you're a high tech company, or you're a medical device, or depending on the service, right? A lot of the service industry has been decimated.
I think
There's,
I think from a planning perspective, myself included, a lot of people are thinking, okay, this is the once in a century, once in my lifetime, fantastic disruption. And this isn't going to happen again. Not in my tenure at this company, the next 10, 20 years. This is the thing. So we probably don't have to be ready to, go without revenue for 6 months again. We just need to make sure that what we're doing is we're able to adjust. I
correct.
remember thinking, as I made a poor investment decision and went with what my head was saying instead of what financial advisors say, is don't try to time things, don't, come in and out. And yet I was like, in March, the global supply chain is disrupted. I mean, Andre's on the call. I was going to do a project for him and it was canceled because he got his product from Wuhan, China. He was basically stalled. I mean, there's nothing in your magic playbook that covers, I can't make anything anymore.
No.
So, besides, 3 standard deviations away from the norm, what are you saying is the implication from a quality standpoint? You've introduced the concept of so many of us working from home. Does that necessarily mean that we need to adjust the way that we measure quality because we're all remote and we're not on the floor looking at the thing ourselves? We're not convening in a conference room. Is that the kind of thing that when you start talking about processes that we need to re-engineer?
Before I answer that, I'm going to take it one step back. I think if you look at across every country, when COVID really hit, there wasn't a consistent message. There wasn't a consistent game plan as far as mask, don't mask, social distance, don't social distance, close down, don't close down. And that's within countries, right? I mean, we've had it, within the US, to be honest, the message just wasn't consistent. That process wasn't consistent, and I, working at the St. Martin's Food Kitchen, as soon as COVID hit and as soon as I started helping, it's just kind of how things have been ingrained upon me. We instantly started requiring masks. And we set up the outside so they could only get food one at a time. And we worked with them to teach them what social distancing meant. And we did that from March until present. And I think that's what, having consistency with your message and your processes and the way you communicate and operate, for large governments down to very small 1 or 2 employee businesses, you have to be consistent. And I think, yes, the virtual workforce, it's been coming before COVID. I can't remember, Joe, if you and I talked about it. It doesn't make sense to require the best of the best to move to Kansas or Indiana just to work for you. If you really want to hire the best resources, and if you could have a remote workforce, that's going to allow you some flexibility. So the virtual workforce has been slowly creeping up. But COVID's just, decimated that kind of legacy mindset that if you're not at your desk, you're not working. That's not how I am with my resources. They all have tasks. I expect them to do them and get them done by the due date. That's it.
I'm gonna refocus, and maybe it's because I feel like we're we're dancing around the subject. I want to see if I can walk away with an answer to, given how we're all remote now,
Mhm.
is there something structural and common that the Institute for Process Excellence is recommending to all clients? Yes or no?
Yes,
And what
but
is that?
it's also the regulatory side, because we're gonna have to go back through all of those regulatory requirements that have been placed upon these businesses to ensure they're still valid and that they can still be met with the virtual workforce.
For
So
example,
are you going to allow individuals to use personal computers to review medical information or medical data? How are you going to manage your quality management system? Do you have the right systems upon systems if your workforce is spread out across multiple cities, multiple states, to actually communicate at real time? How are you going to secure this data? You've got everyone using their own network provider. Some of them might be using work computers, some might not. How's it going to be secure? How are you going to maintain that? So all that from a regulatory standpoint, as an example, is going to have to be looked at. And that's not just medical devices. That's a majority of our customers. Defense is getting hit with that daily. You know, how are we going to manage this if we can't have our workforce on site? And then from a process, from an actual business perspective, yes. I mean, you're going to have to look at your tiered suppliers and your supply chain. And do you want to have all your eggs in one basket when it comes to that ecosystem? Because a lot of us have, right? We haven't looked at a backup that's not in the same region. And I think we're going to have to start looking at from a supply chain perspective. At least have a approved supplier ready and lined up. So there's just a lot of adjustments. The communication process for simple change control, change management, how you run a meeting virtually is a lot different than how you run one that's face to face. A lot of companies have struggled with that. So there's just a lot of the simple things that have to change. And then from a CM2 perspective, we're looking at how you're going to verify and validate your product, you know, from a data, from a simulation, how are you going to ensure that you have all the right players involved making that yes or no go decision. So a lot of that's got to be adapted, and it's not a full change, but it's just a refinement, so to speak.
I just, if she's willing to come on, Lady Deanna is, I see on the call, which is be lovely to see her. Um, Deanna is your right hand, as I understand it, and she has a lot of immediate contact with your clients. I'll be interested to hear, perhaps if she's willing, uh, some anecdotes about what she's hearing out in the field. She's probably relayed some to you. Perhaps you can give us an example, an anonymous example of perhaps something that has demonstrably and clearly gone wrong for one of your clients since April because of our new normal. Can you
Yeah,
give a
from
story?
yeah, yeah, from my seat, I could say, you know, we have had a client that had a large furlough, a large reorganization due to COVID, and they lost a lot of that tribal knowledge, right? A lot of these companies, some of the ones that have been around for a while, they don't follow their processes, you know, or the ones that they do have written down aren't the ones that they actually work to. So a lot of that leadership, or that, you know, again, that kind of cliche tribal knowledge phrase is gone. So now you have these resources that are juggling work, and there's going to be quality escapes with that. So we've been called in to kind of help supplement some of that, because, you know, to survive they had to make some large cuts, and due to those large cuts, um, things get dropped.
She wrote me that you're overworking her and she's unable to participate because you have her doing two things at once. What the? That's not a quality system right there.
Well, I could read what she wrote, so it's not what she actually wrote, but
She
she
wrote
is
something like that. And
but
she's
she
like a
is
millennial or something. She just wrote back, lol. That's not in any. All right.
maybe it's because you're still in your pajamas.
We don't mind. Anyhow, let's uncharacteristically focus. I heard what you said, and yet I would leave with just an abstract of, wow, things changed and you got to get on that. Can you give me something more concrete?
Okay, so you're going to have to reassess who you are. So who's this? Let's just say we got a mid-sized company. You've had some reductions, you've had some furloughs, your supply chain's been disrupted. Now we have to assess who we are. What's the game plan? So what's our DNA now? We know what we were We know this has been a hiccup, but now we got to figure out who we are. So that's stage one. Who's our suppliers? What employees do we have? What talent do we have? What are our gaps? We got to identify all of that. What requirements are we following? What requirements aren't we? What are we meeting now because we're a virtual workforce? Identify all those. Then once you identify those, then you got to lay the plan of what's our 2B? What's our 2B organization? And you got to define that from a supply chain perspective, from an OEM or customer consumer perspective. Do we have to switch our product? Has this taken money out of our innovation coffers for the next 4 years? For a lot of companies that we're working with, this is true. This is survival for the next 3 to 5 years. It's not 2020, 2021. You're talking, this is going to be tough on a lot of companies to claw their way back for the next 3 to 5 years. So they got to define who they're going to be. And that's what we're working with a lot of companies now. What processes can we tweak to make more nimble but still effective, right? You don't want to take out too much. What processes have you been using in the past are no longer valid? So we got to figure out who we are, and then we got to outline who we're going to be. And we're going to have to work with our suppliers now more than ever. We got to treat our suppliers like family. This is something that from a medical device perspective throughout every industry, a lot of our supply chain have been kind of that, go do it because I'm paying you to do it. Well, we've all been hit hard now. So we need to all work together and change the way we communicate throughout the supply chain. So you're going to have to do that assessment as well. This isn't easy. This isn't going to be easy on any size company. We're doing it at IPX. We're reevaluating the next 3 to 5 years. We've had to adjust. We've had to shift. And that's not easy. And a lot of these companies that have laid off a workforce and are looking to bring back or hoping those people would still be there, they're gone, right? They've had to find other means of their jobs. So this is going to change. The dynamic of the global workforce has changed. And we must reassess everything we are and everything we do and everything we promote and make sure it's still valid.
I want to ask of the audience if they raise their hand or identify themselves, if something material has changed in either your work process or with a client that you're working on, that this is very relevant, and if or how you are approaching this. I was hoping I could get Shelby on because he's our cyber buddy. Because when you brought up everyone's working from their own home computers now and things like that, that does scream of opportunity to hack and get into systems and the like. John, you're on mute. Go ahead. You wanted to share something about how all of this has, let's see if I need to unmute you there. You wanted to add something, John?
Yeah, Joseph, you're absolutely right. And actually, Joe, you hit the nail on the head on the difference between, for medical device companies and quality. My background is actually in quality, and I actually accidentally got into medical devices and mostly to help with CE marking and then work with the FDA. And a lot of medical device companies confuse compliance as being quality when it's a totally different issue. And a lot of medical device companies I work with don't understand that difference and how they've got to understand quality is whatever the customer says it is. It doesn't matter what you think or what you hope it might be. And it's really the job of a business.
I need to object to what you just said. That was the essence of the way that I started this conversation, that quality is a nebulous, define as you see fit. Hey, it didn't break for me. That's a quality product. That's not what Joseph's line of work is.
So let me see if I can be the mediator for that. A quality product or process or service that you deliver, the quality term means it conforms to the requirements. Mm-hmm. And what John's saying is typically your customer, your consumer is the one that gives you those end requirements, whether it's a complex product or a very simple toothbrush. A quality product, it ensures it conforms to all those requirements. So the design requirements, the environmental, the regulatory, if it conforms to every one of those requirements, then the equation's simple. You have a product that is of quality.
Let me ask you something for clarification. If I have broken systems, but I perform to the letter of what those systems are, by that definition, do I have a quality product because I followed the rules, broken though they were, to create a product? Is quality a measurement of the gap between the way it should have been done and the way it was done?
It's one way of doing it, but I think the problem is companies look at it from the inside out, when the reality is, purpose of a business is to develop a successful customer. In other words, the customer believes you've made them more successful. And that's the real true measure, I think, of what quality is. But anyway, I wanted to mention that because there's a hot button for me over the years. But the issue of what COVID has done, I'm working with about 5 different medical device companies, some on the West Coast, some on the East Coast, and I'm of course in South Carolina. One company went completely under and owed me some money, but they're reforming. They're in Boston, in the sort of in the hearing healthcare medical device market, and they are basically totally reorganized. And the person I was working with, who was primarily quality and regulatory and business ops, has now become the COO. And we're restarting with the companies in the sort of, I work in exoskeletons quite a bit, or robotics. Those companies are sort of still doing reasonably well. But COVID hasn't changed, because I work from home anyway, my business. If not, it's more diversified and keeps me busier.
Carrie, you wanted to add something? Hello?
I was just raising my hand because COVID has definitely affected our supply chain and how we're doing our business. Even though I have a simple product, which is considered a class 1 medical device, and I never have actually even received a CE mark on it, although we sell to the European countries, because it's also considered similar to an ACE bandage or a simple object that doesn't really need a CE mark. But it has changed dramatically because we do source our product from China. And so we have a liaison here who actually does the hard labor for us. They speak Chinese, they have different companies, but they're having to kind of go back and forth to different manufacturers to find the ones that are still open, still providing quality products that use FDA approved materials. And we have seen a little bit of a change in the quality of the product, which we've had to address. So we've had to change dramatically how we're doing our business for a very simple product. That's like just a simple silicone band, but it's been interesting listening to you discuss what's going on here.
I'm thinking that, if I were you, I'd be, making these adjustments, being smart, getting people on the phone,
Yep.
making adjustments.
Yep.
And as I think about Joseph's world of quality and process, maybe because you're a small organization, you probably are not documenting different things. You're not, putting different things in a system or changing a structure. You just know that I called Jane and now we're going to do this instead of that, right?
Yeah.
That seems very much kind of on the fly, which makes sense for you. And Joseph, as you talk about the way things are done, that kind of approach would not conform to your discipline. Is that right?
No, I think it's still, CM2 goes from large enterprises down to startups, and it's just taking that mentality through our structure. I mean, it's 19 core processes or standards that we have. It's a quality management platform, and you apply them. It's fit for purpose. So in this example, let's take it back. So as you just said in that example with Carrie, so I knew I used to call Jane, I now call Jill at so-and-so company, but we're having some quality issues. Well, I guarantee you, I can tell you why. Because Jane had been working with you for a while, and they had robust processes, or they had a very, very thought out quality management system and platform. So they delivered the component to you as needed or as required, right? So you said, this is what I need from you. Here are the requirements. Thou shalt follow these processes, these FDA material requirements to make this component and give it to me. So things with COVID change, now I have to go to this new supplier. You don't have the same relationship and you don't have the same guarantee that they're doing exactly what Jane was doing. So this is where, from a CM2 perspective, what you would want to document is we need this component here. I use this example. It's a simple vise the other day. Simple vise. We need this delivered to us to be exactly like this. The only way your new supplier is going to make it exactly like you were getting the last time is not only do you give them the design requirements, the regulatory requirements, you must also have documented or sourced the actual assembly, the manufacturing, how it was built on the line, right? All those things from Jane to Jill could vary. And when that varies, this vise could get quite complex or the quality could change quickly. And
Yeah.
it's no different. And that's what you would want to do from a supplier perspective, right? It's in the automotive world, you have your OEM forces you, if you're going to change supplier, they got to go through an approval process. They got to demonstrate that they can make that component. Not only it's got to be as good if, or not better, right? It's got to meet the requirements. There can't be any degradation. You can't have any backsliding or regression. And that's where Carrie's at right now. So we had to make a supply chain and we're having a slight quality issue. Well, it's because that supplier doesn't follow the exact processes that the preferred supplier did.
Okay.
And those are things that's where you can really go in and work with your suppliers and say, okay, we're in this together. We know it's been tough, but we've got to figure out this quality issue. We got to get documented and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yes.
That's a really great example, and it's external from the organization. It's something that I'm bringing in. And typically when I'm thinking about your discipline, I'm thinking about the organization, the building that I go to, where I make the thing. And I'm thinking less about how much would you say, maybe a silly question, is quality like a third about the raw materials and the supplies that you're sourcing?
Are you talking about me or?
I was asking Joe, but if you have a point of view.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carrie, you first.
You know what? It's interesting talking about. It is definitely a combination of both, because simply the molding process is a little bit different. The machinery might be a little bit older. The atmosphere might be different. The amount of dust coming in and out of the facility, whether it's near I don't know, whether it's near a coal plant or an oil plant and it's dirt in the air. I mean, there are all these little factors that change that we're not even sure about, or the tiny little differences in color. So it's hard to know whether it's the process, the people doing it, the machinery. Yeah.
Joe, something on that or no? I'll move on.
No, she honestly, she's spot on. And what that tells you is when you start hearing things like, well, there's a slight difference in color, that there shouldn't be, right? If there's a slight difference in the way it fits on the wrist or how it's applied or the longevity, and it should be the same product, right? We're hearing it. What she's saying is they should have been identical, but they're not. So we didn't take into consideration all of these outliers. Well, from a CM2 holistic perspective, those have to be taken into consideration. And that's what I was the message I was relaying earlier was, this is the time to really dig in with your suppliers.
Yeah.
And really, really get those processes fine-tuned. So, going forward, they could get you the product that you need when you need it. And they're gonna, that's longevity for them, right? But if you're saying, this product should be exactly like this product and everything, and it's not, then you have a requirements problem. You have a traceability problem.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great contribution. Thank you, Carrie.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
I
Carrie.
enjoy bringing Shelby on to calls because every single time he joins, he looks surprised. He has to adjust his camera. He's like, oh, am I on? Yes, you're on. Now, he joined today's call at my behest. I wrote him on the side there, and he didn't hear the beginning part, and he's probably thinking, why did you tell me to come, and what are you going to ask me now that I'm on an internationally broadcast call? Here's the question. Shelby back in 2014 scared the bejesus out of my 10X audience when he brought this really long stick that could decode something that was on your person, and then he could hack into your pacemaker and kill you. He is my cyber guy. And Joseph was talking about how now that we're all remote, and a lot of us are using our own personal computers and things like that, there are going to be compromises to the security of your systems. And Joseph, you can mention a half dozen of them that are part of the quality management chain and things like that. What, Shelby, have you, as your company in the last 6 months, found clients reaching out to you saying, we fundamentally changed, we had a dedicated I'll use an old term if it's even still used, mainframe for this system. And now we're all, patchwork on people's personal Macs and PCs. And how do we get all the systems to work together and have a degree of security that the systems will work reliably and we're not going to compromise on quality? Joseph, did I capture kind of the essence of the question?
Yeah. So from a compliance, data integrity, not just systems, right? We've got now data being transmitted across personal machines and corporate machines. A lot of companies weren't prepared to have their workforce work remotely, so they didn't have secure machines that can go home, right? So there's some risk mitigation there, basically what we've been discussing.
Shel, you froze perfectly at the time that it was your time to speak. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm having quite a bit of problems with things freezing up, so I'm getting kind of parts and pieces and in between the conversation. But I think I kind of
proves the point. I mean,
yeah,
as affected remotely with compromise. My internet went down in the middle of a process, and now I have to start the whole thing. That's not. I mean,
yeah. So yeah,
but if it were like a serious mission critical process, and it's still spooling, and it's like, I'm not smart enough to tell you the manufacturing process and how long it has to take. And if not, then this gets all of that stuff. But here we are remotely relying on factors outside of typical corporate control. What advice or what kind of things would you point us toward as a professional in cybersecurity and system integrity that we should be considering as we have this discussion about quality management and quality processes?
Yeah, and so what we're seeing in my area is a lot of people reaching out and making sure that, first of all, do the corporate policies address the new environment? And from all the way down to, how do we connect to incident response, to what can people have on their desk? How do we do clean desk? How, when people are at home, can your spouse view your records that you're looking at? Just all kinds of policies and procedures around the new environment. And I think that that's one of the big ones. In the era of cloud connectivity and stuff up on the cloud and Microsoft Office, some of the security aspects of that are definitely taken care of. But again, it's, what are you doing on your own home network? If you're definitely needing a secure environment, I've seen some places that have set up specific networks for home environments, depending on what type of information they're gathering. It's definitely a new world, and we don't really know all the implications and the attack vectors yet. It's a lot easier for a hacker to go after your home machines and your home network and to sniff and to try to find information at your home than it would be to go into some type of corporate network. So I think that we'll definitely see some increase of just hacking and social engineering. But, it's definitely a wide open field, but I would say start with your policies and procedures and make sure that there is enough information for your workforce to understand their new environment and what they can and can't do. You can't, you don't want to be throwing away or printing something and throwing it away in your garbage when at the office you had secure bins and destruction and all that stuff. And now we're at home and things are kind of just everywhere.
It sounds very variable. It also sounds as though companies need to have the wherewithal and awareness to reach an organization like yours to help them. And I think that is anything but given.
Well, and to do like a little risk assessment, to know what assets in your organization are at risk and what as an organization you want to protect. As for assets, as for data, but even as things like reputation and some of the softer things, how do we want to look? What is at risk? And how do we protect what's at risk in this new environment rather than how we protected it in the old environment?
Andre, you had a different question. And by the way, just for the record, I didn't let him come on because he's pandering to me by inviting people who watch this to join MDG today. But thank you for your weekly endorsement.
Absolutely. But Joe, taking a step back when Kerry was speaking with you before, I mean, with us, the process starts first with approved vendor list, where a vendor has to be approved to come on first as a vendor. And then we have, a device master record with procedures and so forth. So, I mean, there's a number of steps that we do in advance before switching to another supplier to get a component or something that goes into one of our products. So in a way, that's at least our internal structure in our QMS to avoid the variability that could come now that we have had to switch. As Joe said, we had some suppliers that we had to switch out, but we first started with approving the vendor through a process in an SOP. And then of course the DMR with not only the components, but the procedures and so forth required. So I think that mitigates the risk in the QMS system.
Joseph? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's beyond just, QMS when you start talking about your PLM, from a product lifecycle management. So you got all your CAD data, from a ERP, you got all your financial and all of these systems now, and then what Shelby was alluding to, you have to ensure that we have fail safes in place that we didn't necessarily have to have in place when we were on site. So beyond just QMS, there's a lot of systems out there that weren't as secure in the first place that our employees use, right? That's why we have approved software at a lot of companies, and it drives employees nuts, right? Well, I can't use this. It's not on the approved list. Well, there's a reason it's not on the approved list. We don't have that luxury at home right now. So, Shelby, really touched on one point that we hadn't got to is also, what do you do with printed media, right? What are we doing with that? And we can't kid ourselves. We have to have some common sense of how we are getting rid of all that information and how we're storing it, and are we violating anything? Are we putting ourselves at risk? I know it's been a joke, but we've had a lot of people not know how to use Zoom properly, right? They're doing things that they shouldn't on camera or when they're off mute. If we have people doing that, what are they doing with, secure data? Are they really taking it serious? Where are we exposing ourselves from a product perspective or organizational?
Human error. I mean, we're all individuals. We all have different skills. It just feels like a Pandora's box, and that may be convenient to say, but I'm not hearing a solution that I could feel confident about. I mean, even, if everyone had a Shelby at their side helping them with their procedures, which is definitely not a given. But even then, there's so many variables that,
I think companies are going to have to invest in some, at-home diagnostics. So companies like Shelby could come in and test out your workforce, test out how secure it is. So they could come in, see if there's any known leaks and any hacks, any security flaws that they could easily get into. I think you're going to have to invest in that, in training our workforce how to be secure at home. I just think this is new. This is new territory, to be honest.
Well, the consumer network really hasn't been designed for this. So, I'm sitting at home and upstairs are my kids on an Xbox. So plenty of opportunity, for somebody to come in and sniff the network. And so it's.
We have to hold on. Everything stops. Zaya, say hi. I mean,
That's my friend.
Bobby talks about you all the time. And this is the first time I'm getting a chance to meet you.
This makes up for not having a proper presentation for this meeting.
So you a Bulls fan, or you just like hamburgers?
He's gone.
Matching glasses with Shelby.
Sorry, everyone. I figured Joe would like to say hi.
I appreciate that. I invited Jord on because, as we heard a few weeks back, this man of many talents has talked to north of 1,000 companies in terms of their development pathways. And I have to wonder if the types of questions you're getting now or the considerations that you're advising on have changed since COVID.
That's interesting. I guess I would have to say no on my side, just because I just haven't really seen a lot. We're a service provider, so maybe we're not far enough into, and we're a small company, so we're not far enough into these, like a big company where they would have those issues. We work with a lot of startups, so they're not really, they're pretty much virtual already, even before COVID. Mm-hmm. Some of the bigger clients haven't really heard much. I mean, we've but I guess the thing to say is we've not really gone remote. So we have some people are remote, software engineers, things like that, that can do things practically, but most of the other people, mechanical engineering and all are working here. I mean, we're taking precautions and such, but the one thing that I have noticed, of course, as we've switched to Zoom much more for these interactions, is we're recording a lot. So I know as you do, Joe, and so I'm recording a lot. I find it useful for initial meetings with clients so that later on when the engineers actually have to start working on a project, they get all the background. So I actually actively record as much as possible. And so that becomes, I guess, sensitive data that we have to deal with now. And those are large files and such that. I think that's been the major impact. But as far as our clients, I mean, after that initial slowdown of a few weeks, they've been moving ahead full steam. So that's been good for us, obviously.
I invited Jose for a similar reason. You work with connecting wireless medical devices to the cloud. And there's a lot of sensitive information that goes back and forth between you and the clients and the clients and the cloud. If this transformation where everyone is remote, have you seen any need to change the way you approach developing a quality product?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty fortunate. When we started the company, just, not thinking pandemics at all, we decided to build our company in such a way that people could operate virtually for a different reason. I mean, my philosophy was I want to be able to hire the best people from across the country or across the world. And so I don't want to limit the company to only hiring people within driving distance of our office. And that turned out to be quite serendipitous, right, with what's happened, because from the beginning, our culture and our systems were designed for virtual work. So, we've been using Slack from day one. We use Zoom regularly before the pandemic. All of our QMS management is web-based, and online. So all of our systems have been around that. And I'm fortunate that one of my partners is a cybersecurity expert. So he's ensured that not only do we have good protections in place, but we have training, so people are trained on best practices, what to do, what not to do. If you're at Starbucks, like use a VPN and, those sorts of things. So it's helped out.
The types of products that you develop, because they have that cloud connectivity, is there an implication for your client?
I mean, the implication is that the type of products that we develop all of a sudden are that much more important and attractive, right? Because one of the silver linings of COVID has been that telehealth has really risen to the top of people's minds, and including, kind of what we're talking about, how we manage our operations. I think the same conversations are happening with doctors, like how they manage their practice. So I'm seeing that, clients who interact with doctors quite often are saying things like, this 65-year-old doctor who hated the idea of seeing their patients remotely has kind of been forced to do it, and all of a sudden realize it's not that bad, and in fact it actually has some benefits to it. So they're starting to engage their patients remotely, but now they're starting to hit limitations, like, okay, I can see my patient, but I can't get some of the data that I would get in my office. So you're seeing a surge of products that are being developed for allowing patients to gather their own data and transfer that. And within that, of course, cybersecurity is going to be a key element, but that's been the case for years, right? So even before the pandemic, it was known, and FDA has been providing both guidances and and really driving the need to ensure that you do proper cybersecurity analyses and implement proper risk analysis and controls and everything to do that. So you're seeing it across every industry. We were fortunately positioned internally, both in how we operated and in the type of products that we developed. They've both kind of been helped by COVID in some ways.
Okay, thank you, Jose. Joseph, I know I didn't task you with coming together with a top 10 list of things that you need to do now in the new normal, but perhaps 3 are top of mind that you can leave us with.
I think you have to look at your security policies and your action plan for ensuring data integrity across your new footprint from a workforce perspective. I think Jose and I both touched on it. You need to examine your hiring policies, where they had to be within a certain city at a certain site. You're going to need you have a rare opportunity if you're growing right now to recruit from all over the world, as long as you allow them to work remotely. So you need to look at your hiring, your HR policies as far as where an employee can work and how they can work. And then the third one is, I think you need to do an as-is assessment of who you are now. You know, we've heard some from the small companies that haven't been impacted, and some that have. We need to figure out who you are. And when I say who you are, that's not just your internal, it's your suppliers and your customers. And then define that to be. So I think security, I think workforce, you know, recruitment and retainment, so retention. Right now it's the wrong time to be losing the best of the best, you know, within your own workforce. You know, it's something that I've always pushed. You know, good employees don't leave great companies. So we've got to work on our retention policies as well. And then that third one is we got to figure out who we are now and who we're going to be.
The third one just sounds too much like a soundbite to me. I understand it's deeper than that, but can you give me something meatier in that?
Yeah. Do we have fit for purpose? Do we have a fit for purpose quality management platform for the company we are now? So do we have the right processes? Are we following the right regulatory standards? And are we now capable of designing, manufacturing, and shipping a product that conforms to the as needed requirements, or as designed and as required requirements? So are we built for that now? Have we laid off too many people? Have we lost too many suppliers? Because we're still probably building product, right? We still have to make money. Are we shipping good product? And if you can't say 100% sure, I know that we have shipped good product, then you need to reevaluate and you need to figure out what you need to change. Is that better?
It is. I'm wondering, and giving you an opportunity for a plug here. Everyone's margins are compressed now. We've made less money this year, almost across the board. And so we need to look at every expense that we have. Who can justify hiring IPX now to help them identify these things? Because ignorantly, and I think my ignorance is typical. You're talking about security. Okay, I got it. Hiring and retention. Okay, I have an HR department. We need to make sure that our systems are, okay, I have a team member who knows what the regulations are, or I think they do, and they're adjusting things. Do I really need to bring you in to help us do that? Your soup to nuts process. Can I afford that time and money now to have you
afford
join
not
us to do that?
You know, I think a lot of the clients we're working right now, they realize now's the time. You know, they didn't make an excuse to do it when they had money, and now they're suffering from it. You know, and we've adjusted as well. You know, we're not going in and doing these large transformational programs, you know, like you said, from ground up, or, you know, even with the startup, you know, they've got some processes that need tweak. We're going in now very tactical, you know, and we're assessing the areas that they know they need help or they've lost resources. So it could be in product design, it could be in systems of systems. So your PLM, your QMS. So what's the need? Where do you need to staff? Where are you seeing issues? You know, just like Carrie mentioned with the quality, with the supply chain, we'd go in, we'd work with that supplier and Carrie's organization, say, okay, supplier A was able to get us a perfect product. We need to figure out what you need to do as supplier B to get us the same component. So go in tactically, work with the supplier, share that cost, get that process documented, figure out what's going on in the environmental side to make the component change, or the color change, or the way it works change, and identify that. So for us, it's very tactical. And I'd push back now more than ever. Do you not have time to make sure you have experts at this? I mean, you got expert for cybersecurity. You maybe have an expert for HR, depending on the size of your company, if you're taking it serious. Do you really have an expert that could come in and look your CEO in the eye and go, I know you've been doing it this way for 5, 10, 15 years, but this isn't going to work anymore. And by the way, your product, your quality metrics are going down from the way it's been delivered. So for us, it's very tactical. They could be quick iterative phase projects from a staff log perspective. So we've adjusted to work with companies and get extremely, extremely dialed in on what can we fix now to bring you value tomorrow.
The conversation we had with Carrie was illustrative for me, and the way I think of it is there's no degree of specificity too small for documentation, so that if everyone who has any knowledge of how to do anything is wiped off the map, I can give the documentation to somebody brand new and have a hope of them being able to replicate what I once did.
Spot on.
And tell me in your experience, how many companies do you know that could do that? Like less than 1%, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other, and we'll wrap, is, and I suspect that many of the people who need to know this already do. I'm not typically someone who trades in this, so I don't know. What are the most important or common quality metrics that we need to look at?
Does it conform to the requirements for me? And I know this is a high level statement for you, and you're going to want me to dig into that, but you have design requirements.
Like I said before, when John was on, is quality a function of how closely do I meet what I documented when I made the thing? So it's like delta, but that doesn't assume that my process that I had documented was a good one to begin with. But that's not what measuring quality is. It's, did I hit that? Am I right?
Yeah. Plus you have your design requirements, regulatory, and you have your consumer, your customer requirements. If it meets all those, then you have a quality product. The variance in quality is how far do you deviate from those requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And you were dancing around it. Did we get the right requirements in the first place? Right? We see changes to products because we really didn't have the right requirements. Did I lose you?
You did for a moment. You really kind of did that, but I find that it actually catches up and then you just went. Joanne writes, companies, high-level leadership teams should hold a quality management review meeting at least quarterly where you look at the metrics for products and all major quality systems. I'm sure that will give an emphatic nod from you.
Yep. Yep.
No.
Don't hide it under the rug. A lot of companies do. And then, or they'll take that and they'll write a change to it and call it an innovation when really it's a corrective action. Be honest with your change record data. If you have a product design and you're changing that product that's been in production or is in production, you should classify it as a corrective action.
You are among the more difficult friends to get a hold of. Can you maybe set aside some time for MDG folks to catch you for a half hour and get an assessment of their systems? I know a half hour is inadequate, but just kind of a sense of how broad is the hole that they need to fill.
Yeah, we'd be happy to help. I'm happy to discuss it.